So let's start just describing the objectives of this territorial review. This territorial review has three main chapters. The first one devoted to analyze the socioeconomic trends of the NORA region. The second one focusing on the main shared challenges and strengths of the region. And the final chapter devoted to stress how transnational cooperation could help on addressing these main challenges of the region. So before starting to describe these four main challenges that we underlined on this review, just to give you a few notes on the economic trends on the region. The NORA territories have relatively high GDP per capita. If we compare with the OECD average, only Greenland will fall well below the OECD average. If we look at the performance, we can see the economic performance. We can see that prior to the economic crisis, the performance has been quite solid. However, if we look at Greenland and Faroe Islands, we can also see some fluctuations from year to year. These fluctuations are mostly related to fluctuations on the fish industry. So just after giving you this brief description of the economic trends, let's focus on these four main challenges that we described and we analyzed in our territorial review. These four main challenges are accessibility and peripherality. Second, sustainable development of the fishing industry, economic diversification and innovation, and finally, climate change. So starting for the first one, we see that distances in this region are a very important factor. Distances within each of the territories, between the different localities and settlements of each of the territories, distances between the different territories, and distances as well with the main economic markets, main world economic markets. Apart from distances, the links, connections are quite weak. Not only the connections between the different territories, but also connection with the neighbors, with Canada, for instance, with Scotland, that are the main neighbors. Connections are quite weak. Apart from distances, there is the challenge of demography. Related to that, the challenge of demography. We are talking about scarcely populated regions, and there have been a trend towards concentration of population on the largest localities. Related with that, there have been a trend of, you can observe a trend of migration of population out of the region, especially of those highly skilled workers migrating out of the region. So there is we can observe in many territories, especially in Greenland and Faroe Islands, a trend of brain drain. At the same time, the smaller localities and settlements face a problem with aging, and these two phenomena together represent a real challenge for public service delivery, for delivery of services like education or health in the smaller localities. Let's move to the second challenge, the development of sustainable fisheries, and we observe that, of course, the economic base of the region and of the different territories of the region is still very dependent on fisheries and also on raw materials like oil and gas. But overfishing, increasing global competition, and structural adjustment on the fishing fleet have resulted in important employment reductions. Again, my colleague Carl Christian Schmidt will come back right after me, focusing on this specific topic. The third challenge we focused on this territorial review was the challenge of economic diversification. Have to diversify the economy, and because greater diversification will help to reduce the risks that for economy dependent on very few products, especially raw materials, will mean the volatility of the prices and also the changing external demand. So we focus on the review on this issue of greater diversification and the effects that innovation could also have on diversifying the economy. However, we realize that diversification is a complex issue. Economic diversification is a complex issue in a small resource-based economy that are dominated by a large public sector and a small number of large resource-based companies, as is the case of the NORA territories. And finally, the last challenge we underlined on this review is the challenge of the strong impact of climate change in the region. Climate change is expected to affect more and earlier to this region, more and earlier than other parts of the world. Some of the effects are clearly negative, especially the effects on the changing migratory trends of fisheries, and the increase of number of extreme weather events, and also especially on the effects on traditional communities. There's potential effects of climate change over traditional hunting, traditional fishing. But also there might be some opportunities for some sector. For instance, on longer creep seasons, easier extraction and transport of minerals, and easier and longer navigation season on the Arctic. The severity of the impacts will depend, at least partly, on the adoption of comprehensive adaptation plan. Taking into account these four main challenges that we analyze on this territorial review, which could be the benefits that transnational cooperation could offer to address them. Given the range of similar characteristics and challenges of this territory and the small size of their economies, we think that there are many benefits that transnational cooperation can bring, starting, for instance, for the exchange of know-how and best practices to confront the demographic challenges, the exchange of information for climate change, for the development of fisheries. At the same time, small critical masses and in general reduced resources of the different territories call for joining resources and reaching economies of scale at a regional level and beyond. For instance, for the development of new technologies, for cooperation in research and education, or for joint promotion and branding and development of the regional tourism. Cooperation in public sector provision is also another opportunity. There is already, of course, a lot of cooperation going on, but there could be further opportunities. Increasing the voice and profile of the region is another opportunities. For instance, the voice of the region in international fora could be better here if the different territories go together and express and defend their points of view together. But transnational cooperation is not easy and faces some barriers. Starting by the fact that the main economic sectors of the different territories are very similar. So NORA territories compete, for instance, in fisheries, compete in each other. But even in those sectors in which there are competition, we think that there is a room for cooperation. For instance, in the case of fisheries, for agreeing on managing the shared stocks of fisheries, or for for sustainable development of the fisheries, there is also room for cooperation. But of course, there are barriers apart of this barrier of competition. Sometimes, even if long-term gains and benefits from cooperation may be assumed, short-term benefits can be elusive, and at the same time, long distances between the different territories can be also a barrier for cooperation. And finally, we underlined the strong linkages that these territories have with other territories or other countries beyond the NORA region. For instance, for Greenland and Faroe Islands, it would be currently easier, given the historical and institutional links with Denmark. It will be easier, of course, to cooperate sometimes with Denmark than with other the neighbors in the NORA region, which they shared challenges and that are located closer. So, taking into account these barriers for cooperation, we go a step further and make some recommendations on how to take the best and the most from transnational cooperation. Starting for the point that it would be very important to communicate the positive outcomes of cooperation. As I said, sometimes the benefits of cooperation are difficult to perceive, especially in the short term. So communicating the benefits of cooperation would be very important. But of course, you cannot cooperate with everyone on everything. So it will be very important to focus the efforts, and we thought that for rationalizing these cooperation efforts, it would be very important to build a long-term regional development strategy in the region. This would help to focus effort and also to reach an agreement with the main stakeholders in the regions on the main areas for cooperation. For this, we think that there is a need of an institution facilitating cooperation process, and that the linking role of the NORA institution would be very, very, very important. Finally, we mentioned the importance of reinforcing regional transport and networks and interchanges in the region as a very important issue for facilitating cooperation. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to all the team that participated on this report, to my colleagues on the OECD, to the peer reviewers from Canada and from Scotland, to the NORA organization. This was always that we conduct a territorial review. It's not only us that do the job. We ask our counterpart to make also a very big effort, and organizing the missions and giving us the background report was I think a very heavy job, and they did it well. So thank you very much to everyone.